polling still has its role. And I really do believe that research for a political campaign today is a three-legged stool. It is polling, it is data analytics, and it is sentiment analysis. But the problem with the three-legged stool is anybody who doesn't have one of those three is going to fall over. And that is what I see happening right now, is that a lot of them are using one of the three or two of the three, and not many are using all three of them. And those that are the ones that are going to be most successful. So you're right. I saw, because of my work with Brad, and you've worked with him, you know what a brilliant guy is. And he had been running eyesover for a few cycles before this. And I saw the accuracy, but most of all, Sean, I saw the usability of it. I saw the fact that eyesover was picking up information that I didn't think as a pollster to even ask about. And the cool thing about the way the sentiment works is we measure voter sentiment in real time across millions of posts. And from that, we can very quickly get at what issues dominate. If you do a poll and say, I ask open ends, and okay, it takes a while to code it, maybe I'll put these in different buckets. Well, the fact is I just finished a project for a client, nationwide client, 3 issues dominating right now: economy, border security, and housing. Now, what they see here is voters consistently expressing high frustration over high costs, mortgage rates, still lack of control of the border. We're not talking vague dissatisfaction. We're seeing emotional spikes around these topics that shift support rapidly.
All right, guys, good Friday to you. We've made it through the work week. Then again, it was a short work week. So, but I'll take it. I'm back to the weekend. I'm excited about that. Big show headed your way right now. We talk a lot about polling, and I've got some exclusive data analysis for you from Chris Wilson. He was on the show probably a month ago with a real deep dive into voter sentiment. And I think you're going to be blown away by what you see here. For all these people who love to talk about polling and where Trump is, this is a real deep dive on what voters are actually talking about, the conversation that they're having. And I think it's going to change a lot of attitudes about where we are as we head into the midterm elections. But yesterday, guys, by the way, RFK was on fire on the Hill yesterday. He was making the case right off the bat where we were health-wise as a country and why what he's doing is so important. Take a look.
This morning, I got the latest numbers from CDC that 76.4% of Americans now have a chronic disease. This is stunning. When my uncle was president, it was 11%. 1950, it was 3%. Today, it's 76.4%. 8 out of 10 of our kids cannot qualify for military service. This is a national security issue. When my uncle was president, we spent 0 on chronic disease. Today, we spend $1.3 trillion. It's the biggest cause, it's increasing. And all of the arguments that Republicans and Democrats have about single payer, Obamacare, or the various ways to allocate the health dollars, they're all like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. If we don't end this chronic disease, we are the sickest country in the world. That's why we have to fire people at CDC. They did not do their job. This was their job to keep us healthy.
That's it. If you don't look at that and say we need change, then something's wrong. Senator Ron Wyden tried to get into it with him. RFK, one after another, just made these guys look like a total bunch of clowns. This is the exchange he has with Ron Wyden, though. I got to play it for you. Take a look.
You've sat in that chair for how long? 20, 25 years, while the chronic disease in our children went up to 76%. And you said nothing. You never asked the question why it's happening. Why is this happening? Today, for the first time in 20 years, we learned that infant mortality has increased in our country. It's not because I came in here. It's because of what happened during the Biden administration that we're going to end.
So, it's unbelievable. These guys, it all happened on their watch, and they want to blame Bobby for addressing it? Give me a break. Pretty unbelievable. All right, a couple of housekeeping issues before I bring in Chris Wilson. Well, first, I'm going to write a whole column about this explaining because a lot of people are asking. I went on Gavin Newsom's podcast because I wanted to take the fight to a new audience, to explain what President Trump is doing, why he's winning, and why we have a better way. It was a great conversation. it's, I don't generally promote other people's podcasts, but I think it was a good conversation. And I think I reached a new audience, which is what President Trump does all the time. So take a look if you want. I put it on my social media accounts. By the way, next week, huge week. I've told you September is going to be unbelievable. Rod Blagojevich, the former governor of Illinois, Monday. Jack Ciattarelli, the governor, Republican gubernatorial candidate, and Jim McLaughlin are both going to be here. He's running in New Jersey. We'll break it all down. On Thursday, an amazing panel for you. And on Friday, our good buddy Seth Keshel is going to break down the latest in voter trends. By the way, we had a great rant coming this week about crime. You always want to hit that subscribe and notification button so you don't miss our Saturday and Sunday rants. So that's why you always see them just on YouTube. By the way, I've asked you guys, I know a lot of you watch on YouTube or X, but even if you don't, please go to Apple and Spotify and give the audio version a 5-star review. I love when that happens. If you're watching on YouTube, please continue to subscribe. That's great, but we can keep growing the show on all fronts. I would love giving everyone a shout out who's doing this. And there's All Bowler 1722, and he said, just wait until people see the tax refund from no tax on tips and no tax on overtime. My liberal son was unaware that was even a thing until the mainstream doesn't talk about it. Good point on that. That's why we do. But I think you're absolutely right on this. And here's one that actually was about our great sponsors over at Boll & Branch Sheets. And this is from KCD05DZs. She saw my recommendation, got the Spicer discount, and is in love with her new Boll & Branch Sheets. They're not even a sponsor today, but I'm going to give a big shout out. It's bollandbranch.com/Spicer for 15% off. But you have to use that URL to get the free shipping and 15% off. Thanks for doing that. But one of our great sponsors today, as we head into the weekend, is so perfect because I love grilling and getting into the omelets and eggs for the weekend, are the folks over at Firecracker Farm Hot Salt. This is what it looks like. It's got Ghost, Reaper, and Scorpion hot peppers in this thing. I know it's hot salt, but it's actually just a great additional flavor to anything that whether it's vegetables, chicken, it doesn't matter. I think this stuff adds a total kick. It keeps selling out. That's how popular it is. Megyn Kelly's been talking about it. Joe Rogan's been talking about it. It's a small batch American company. So when you can get it, I recommend getting it because it will sell out again. It adds a level of flavor that you probably have never experienced in your life. But you go to firecracker.farm, right? So that's instead of the .edu or .com or .org, it's firecracker.farm, and use code Spicer for a discount. Firecracker.farm. Use code Spicer for a discount just for our listeners and subscribers. By the way, once you have a great meal, you know what you're going to want to do is go to sleep. And that's what I do every night. I crush a little scoop of my Beam Dream Powder. I get asked about this all the time. Literally, I was out last night. Everyone says, do you actually use this? Yes, I do. Every single night. A scoop of Beam, put it in some water, microwave for 30 seconds. Some people like the milk. I don't really care. It is all natural, amazing flavor. Reishi, apigenin, L-theanine, magnesium, and melatonin. I'm not kidding. 30 minutes after you take that, your head hits the pillow. You're going to have an amazing night's sleep. Wake up feeling rip-roaring, ready to go. I'm telling you, it's a great American company, and it will be the best thing that you can do in your wellness journey. Go to shopbeam.com/Spicer. Use code word Spicer for 40% off. I would get all the flavors because they're all amazing. Shopbeam.com/Spicer. Use code word Spicer at checkout. Shopbeam is where you want to go. All right, without further ado, I want to bring in the APAC pollster of the year in 2021 and the current CEO of Eyesover, Mr. Chris Wilson. Chris, welcome back to the show. I'm excited to hear all the new data that you guys have, but I got to be honest with you. I want to play for you a clip and just get your reaction because you're a student of politics first and foremost. This is and I had to commiserate with someone. I'll be honest with you. I'm excited to get into all the new data that you guys have and how it's so different than the polling. We talked about this last time you were on, but I needed somebody to talk to. And I mean, so this is a clip I want to play you of Senator Tim Kaine. Now, I'm going to tell the audience this before just to remind everyone. Tim Kaine is a senator from the Commonwealth of Virginia, the home of Thomas Jefferson. He was the governor before he was the senator. I say all this because when I play you this clip, just try not to fall out of your chairs. This is the senator from Virginia in a Senate hearing. Play the clip.
The notion that rights don't come from laws and don't come from the government, but come from the creator, that's what the Iranian government believes. It's a theocratic regime that bases its rule on Shia law and targets Sunnis, Baha'is, Jews, Christians, and other religious minorities. And they do it because they believe that they understand what natural rights are from their creator. So the statement that our rights do not come from our laws or our governments is extremely troubling.
Okay, it's now look, if you're listening to the show on the audio podcast version, what you're not seeing is Tim Kaine has his glasses on his forehead. And I would recommend that Mr. Kaine put the glasses on and read the Declaration of Independence, who a fellow Virginian, Thomas Jefferson, was one of the chief authors of. And it said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with unalienable rights." I didn't think this was debatable, Chris Wilson. I literally was like, I need to get Chris Wilson's take on this tomorrow because maybe I'm just I live in Virginia and I'm too sensitive. But I'm like, this is not a debatable point.
No, it's self-evident. It is the Declaration of Independence. It's something we all learned growing up. It's on the 4th of July. I do a pilgrimage to the archives and read them every year. It's Thomas Jefferson made it clear that our rights are unalienable because they're endowed by our creator. It's the cornerstone of American liberty. If the government gives you rights, it can take them away. But if God gives them to you, no politician can touch them. And that's the key thing. And I got to give a shout out to my old boss, Ted Cruz, who said it best at the time. Our rights don't come from politicians. They come from God Almighty. And he's right. That's the difference between liberty and tyranny. And it is stunning to me that Tim Kaine doesn't understand that. And frankly, it shows how far the Democratic Party has drifted, that they believe that government can give you rights. But they also believe, as it's proven so many times, that they'll just take them away at the moment, at the drop of a hat. Oh, let's stop you from going to church because we think you might get sick. And it's a scary concept, what he said about how little they understand, how little he understands, the Democratic Party understands about our fundamental rights and the way this nation was founded.
Yeah, the funny thing is, I haven't been in the Senate chamber in quite some time, but I spent the latter half of my career on the House, where like literally above the rostrum there, it says, one nation under God. Our money says under God. Like, I'm literally, and again, I don't ever want to bring anyone's religion into this, but when he ran for vice president, he always talked about how he's like a proud Catholic. And I'm like, the idea that you are, and he's comparing us to Iran. He's like, the Iranians believe stuff like this. And I'm like, no, dude, we do. This is, all right. I needed to commiserate with someone before we get into this, but let me just remind viewers who didn't see you the first time that you came on the show. You were, as I said in the introduction, you were the pollster of the year in 2021. Okay. So that's like, just to explain to people, like this is like being the MVP of the Super Bowl. And then you basically said, I'm walking off the field and I'm going into this whole new world of data-driven information, which is, I mean, again, you're like the top of the thing. People are probably knocking on your door saying, "Hey, Chris Wilson, can you do a poll for us? Hey, Chris, can you work on our campaign?" And you're like, "Sorry, stage right." And so when you guys with Brad Parscale launched Eyes Over, what is the nut of it? Why is this different than what we see in polling? Because I know that you guys are very open and transparent about like, hey, here's our poll. Here's what the race looked at. Here's the delta, right? Like, so no one's perfect. No one's going to get dead on every time. But your delta, you'll post like, hey, the margin of error was 10.21. We had it at 10.46. And so, again, like no one expects anybody to be perfect. But you do that, I assume, to be very clear about how much more accurate that you are than a traditional poll.
Well, I think I feel like I'm getting a little bit too aggressive in the paint here. Or maybe I should find a college football analogy since we're in football season, because polling still has its role. And I really do believe that research for a political campaign today is a three-legged stool. It is polling, it is data analytics, and it is sentiment analysis. But the problem with the three-legged stool is anybody who doesn't have one of those three is going to fall over. And that is what I see happening right now, is that a lot of them are using one of the three or two of the three, and not many are using all three of them. And those that are the ones that are going to be most successful. So you're right. I saw, because of my work with Brad, and you've worked with him, you know what a brilliant guy is. And he had been running Eyes Over for a few cycles before this. And I saw the accuracy, but most of all, Sean, I saw the usability of it. I saw the fact that Eyes Over was picking up information that I didn't think as a pollster to even ask about. And the cool thing about the way the sentiment works is we measure voter sentiment in real time across millions of posts. And from that, we can very quickly get at what issues dominate. If you do a poll and say, oh, I ask open ends and okay, it takes a while to code it. Maybe I'll put these in different buckets. Well, the fact is I just finished a project for a client, nationwide client, 3 issues dominating right now: economy, border security, and housing. Now, what they see here is voters consistently expressing high frustration over high costs, mortgage rates, still lack of control of the border. We're not talking vague dissatisfaction. We're seeing emotional spikes around these topics that shift support rapidly. And so because of that, if a poll is in the field, it's asking about it, maybe something spikes at the same time, the poll is going to be accurate in measuring, most likely, depending on weighting and sampling and things like that. But let's just assume all the best. It's going to be accurate in measuring what was occurring there when it was in the field. What happens if that spike occurs the day it gets out? And the beauty of Eyesover and the sentiment analysis is it allowed me to go so much deeper on behalf of my clients to tell them that, hey, sorry, I didn't ask this question. I mean, how many times you've been in the field of a survey and someone says, oh, I wish we'd asked about this. It just happened afterwards. You don't have to do that. You measure it in real time, you see things happen, and you're able to adjust accordingly in the exact moment that it is happening. So
is this what you call like data? I mean, when people, and I'm not a tech nerd, but like when you say sentiment analysis, is that what people refer to when they say like data scraping? Like you're going in and looking at how people are interacting on social media and websites, and like is that what sentiment analysis is at its core?
It is. It is tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of data points that are looking at every conversation that occurs online. And it's not scraping, and that's an important distinction. For any of your tech nerds, I don't want them to think I'm doing anything illegal or violating terms of service. We pay a lot of money to X, to Elon Musk, and to Meta and Facebook to be able to pull data down from an API. And that the data is anonymized, but we're able to know because people put it in their the list where they are. There's geolocation information we can apply that tells us exactly where what's going on in the New Jersey governor's race, and Virginia governor's race, and even looking ahead in the primaries, what's going on in California. I just sent out a report about an hour ago on the redistricting fight going out in California and how unpopular Gavin Newsom continues to make himself through his little cute escapades and trying to copy the president. And so from that standpoint, the ingestion of all this data, that again, we term service followed, pay for APIs, but it's also things like we've added in Blue Sky. We take data from RSS feeds and Reddit. And I'll tell you, I do consider myself very techie, but I had no idea the level of data I was missing by not spending all kinds of time on Reddit. The subreddits that exist around different issues are fascinating. Facebook groups, things like that. And so that's what we're ingesting. And from that, we're able to pull out the sort of information you see in the weekly reports we send out. And I would encourage all of your viewers and listeners to go sign up for, because we make them available to all of our subscribers. It's free to subscribe and see what we're putting out. And it is a great thing I know we're going to talk about it, but you get these memos that are put out by the Doug Sosniks of the world that are just catnip for the consultant class that I look at, and it makes my head want to explode, Sean, because it's great if you're into conventional wisdom, but it is so inaccurate that it is just anyway. It's
you brought it up. So you brought it up. So let's go down that rabbit hole. So there's a Democratic pollster strategist named Doug Sosnik who puts out these memos about the state of play, and Politico eats them up and says, here's the latest state of play according to Doug. And he writes this memo, they gives it to them exclusively, they put it out, and then everything is framed. And that's the key. See, this is what I think people miss, is that if they tell you that the voters are thinking X, Y, and Z, then they frame every story through that poll as if it's gospel truth. So Sosnik puts out this memo and Politico writes about it the other day. And it basically says, hey, Trump's going to be a drag on the ticket going into the midterms. And so now everything is teed up. And I believe I've had this conversation over and over again with various pollsters as well. I got to believe Trump won. Okay. So I know this, just hear me out, right? So Trump got a majority of the vote. He won all 7 battleground states, and he's doing everything that he said he was going to do. So just on a prima facie case, without any data behind him, if you vote for a candidate that does everything they say they're going to do, you got to believe that and you won a majority of the vote, then you would have to believe that you have a positive approval rating. But according to you picked pick the group. Quinnipiac, the New York Times, whatever. Trump is at like 31% and the rest of the country hates him. That's clearly not true. And it also doesn't reflect, I know that pollsters and people hate when you say this, it's like yard signs, but like I talk to enough people, I have a wide enough group that enough people who are excited about what Donald Trump is doing, it just doesn't match that public polling. So talk to me. Let's start with like Congress right now. The midterms are coming. They say that Doug Sosnik says that he's going to be this massive drag on the congressional ticket, 3-seat majority before redistricting. We can get to California later, but let's just talk about where does the generic ballot, as you guys like to call it, where does that stand as we get closer to the midterms?
Yeah. So here's the thing I would say, and I would add to what you said a little bit. I mean, the problem with turning uncertainty into a PowerPoint, which is what Sosnik does and a lot of others do, is it ignores what voters are actually saying. It gets back to the conversation we just had, which is they always conclude that things are going to return to normal. And it's just a quarterly security blanket, for those who never understood why Trump won in the first place. So to answer your question, our data shows the opposite of what Sosnik wrote about. He's still relying on static approval ratings. What we do is we measure momentum. Trump may sit in the mid-40s in polls, but when it comes to voter energy on issues that matter, that I just mentioned a little bit ago, economy, border, housing, he dominates, Sean. In fact, the real-time analysis, and I was looking at this just before I came on your show to say, okay, has anything changed since yesterday? And no, it shows him outperforming polling expectations in 2024 across battlegrounds. So Sosnik says, of course, Trump's appeal isn't transferable, but it just ignores what happens in Ohio, Montana, Pennsylvania. It's like Bernie Moreno and John Tester never lost, and Bernie Moreno never won, and Doug McCormick never won. So no, he's not a drag. If anything, Sean, he's the engine that's going to propel us to additional wins in 2026. So to your point about generic ballot, it's difficult for me to speak in terms of that because that's kind of, again, taking the polling data and trying to turn it into PowerPoint. So I would say instead, Republicans are in a stronger position than a legacy analysis admits. So we've tracked over 2 million posts so far this cycle. And what we're seeing is voter frustration is squarely aimed at Democrats. The wrong track numbers that Sosnik cites are not hurting Trump. And this is what's fascinating because you go look at it. It's always been this measure. Right direction, wrong track. Well, the wrong track goes to this number. Republicans or the party in power loses. That's not the case. And that's the thing is people don't understand that Trump broke the mold for the way these measurements affect politics. So the wrong track numbers are not hurting Trump. They're actually fueling him. And what our sentiment shows is voters associate high costs, insecurity, and chaos with the Democrats. So Trump.
Why? But doesn't that, if we can try, I mean, and again, hey, I'm excited. Don't get me wrong. Like, this is good news. It's like, but I'm just, I would assume if you're frustrated, you would blame the incumbent party.
That's just in the past, yes. And that's the simple explanation. It's the way that I would have explained it before I sat in this chair and started doing this job. Trump's disruptive image plays into this dissatisfaction. It's like voters get to be angry with the Trump because he's up there talking about what a horrible job Biden did and how Democrats won't do this and are not building the wall and all these other aspects. The political map isn't locked. It's realigning, but it's not realigning in the way Sosnik thinks. It's realigning in kind of the way that Trump's drawing it out. And I've heard people, the president and I don't, so I don't want to try and divine his intent, but he certainly seems to have this ability to understand the way in which communication, marketing, political marketing in this case, impacts opinions. And he's been more successful at that than probably anybody in the history of mankind. And so because of that, we see that happening here as well. And the Sosniks of the world and the DC permanent class just can't get their heads around that. And Sean, to be candid, I couldn't either in 2016 when I was on the other side of him working for Ted Cruz.
Well, the funny thing see, this is what makes sense to me, though, because I go back to what I said, a few minutes ago, which is if you're Donald Trump, right, he does a couple things. One, he tells you what he's doing to solve the problem. He's taking action, and he's not just talking about it, he's taking action, like DC, right, holding that up as an example. And then you have Democrats, and this is where I think that a memo like Doug Sosnik puts out, Chris, and tell me if I'm right on this piece. So I think on the equation piece, he talks about what he's doing to solve X problem, fill in the blank. He tells you who's the problem, like Biden did this, da, 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 da. But then he also creates a contrast, which is, okay, in crime, if you live in Chicago or anywhere else, like, hey, J.B. Pritzker and Mayor Johnson, Brandon Johnson, are the problem. So he creates to you an issue. And the problem, this is where I don't think that most of the Democrats and the legacy kind of outlets are getting, which is you may not fully be embraced with, 100% on Team MAGA. Okay, whatever. But the Democrats are offering nothing. They are leaderless. They are messageless. They are financially screwed. And so I think that one of the things that's missing in this equation is they keep asking about Donald Trump and saying he's going to be a drag. But then I keep saying, well, what about the other side? Because you realize that they have leaders too. So if you're an ex-candidate running for office as a Dem, who are you pointing to? Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, Nancy Pelosi, AOC, like
Gavin Newsom.
Like what? But at some point they're asking things in a vacuum, right? And that's where I think that this whole discussion misses the voter sentiment that you guys are picking up, is that I might not be happy, but I look to an alternative, right? And say, wow, that place really sucks. So, and it's you think about it like a restaurant. Like you go to a restaurant and someone says, hey, this isn't the best place in the entire world. You go, okay, you're right. It's not awesome. But the place across the street really sucks, right? So it doesn't mean you're going to just give up on, and I think that sometimes we do that with candidates. We're not 100% on board, but the alternative is really bad. And I think that's that we're not picking that up. The Democrats don't have an alternative. They have no plan. They have no policies. They have no leaders.
Yeah, that's right. And to go back to Sosnik here, he argues the GOP strategy is just about turning out the base. He says, there's no way that can work again in 2026. And so I would point to, if you only look at polling averages, you'd think that the Republican has no growth path. The Republican Party has no growth path. But sentiment shows something different again here. And this gets right to your point. Trump's positions on the issues that matter break through to independents. They break through to persuadables. And so, yes, to a certain extent, campaigns matter. But it's a campaign that doesn't have to fight an uphill battle against a generic ballot or an unpopular president or things like that. Because what he is doing is, no, Democrats don't like it. Hardcore Dems don't like it. But the persuadables and the independents do. And because we don't have any other examples in 2024, I'll give you another Bernie Moreno example in Ohio. Eyesover tracked his momentum spike after a Trump rally in a border video. And that's what caused him to surge ahead. So base turnout is important. But what our data shows is that crossover voters are moving too. And that's because, to the point you're making, they're not attracted by Hakeem Jeffries at AOC or Gavin Newsom or anybody like that. They don't take them seriously. There's no leadership there. There's no charisma. There's no one who's giving them an idea of what they would actually do if Democrats took power. So what's key here and this is what I'm paid to do, is advise Republicans, is Republicans win when they stay sharp on the issues that drive emotion and attention. And that's what I'm trying to do and put out these reports that show what those are.
Okay. So you based on what you're telling me and what your latest report says, it's the economy, border, and housing are the decisive drivers. Okay, fine. Trump's been talking a lot about crime. The Democrats are talking a lot about Epstein. I mean, there's a bunch of other issues that are going on in terms of tariffs and when you advise Republicans right now in the White House, when they start saying, great, we're going in and we're talking about crime, where does that doesn't seem to fit into that matrix of decisive issues, nor does Epstein. So is it just, are those media creation issues? Are they following a bad advice? Like what would you tell them about those?
Well, I think it's very simple in terms of the area they live in, but voters aren't stupid. If they see crime rising in their communities while elites sort of skate past accountability, that's a problem. Jeffrey Epstein was running a sex trafficking operation with some of those powerful people in the world. We still haven't seen the full client list. Meanwhile, scared parents at school board meetings were labeled domestic threats. That's why people feel the system is broken. So justice isn't supposed to have a VIP entrance. And getting back to that, and I'm sorry to get sidetracked here because you know I did Glenn Youngkin stuff. I'm not working for Winsome Sears, but I see the same sort of, you live there. You tell me if I'm wrong, but I see the same sort of populist attitudes bubbling up in Northern Virginia right now that helped elect Glenn Youngkin that I think could catapult Winsome Sears into elite. But this is, from a standpoint of addressing it, I think we got to remember here that the DOJ DOJ targets pro-life activists and parents at school boards, where they still can't seem to get their hands around the DOJ under Obama, Biden, Democrats in general, but they weren't able to get involved. So it tells you everything you need to know about how the system is broken. And I think that's really the key here, Sean, is that Republicans have got to address the system being broken all the way around. And they can't, and it's got to be on both sides of the issue.
Okay, so what about, like, I was actually really fired up about Doge. Like, I was just so excited to see accountability in government, calling out wasteful spending, mismanagement, duplicity, sort of programs. And I think with Elon, it largely is gone now. Is that something that they should revive? And to your talk about, like, the system is broken. When I hear about a Social Security mine where information is stored, I go, that doesn't make any sense. So what is it like? It was Doge a good idea, and should it continue?
So here's what I think is interesting about Doge is the Democrats did a good job painting Doge or turning it into a negative term. And so whereas that was something that I was advising 6 months ago that Republicans use as a talking point, now not so much. It's more about just cutting waste. And but I don't think Doge, Elon Musk has left. What I understand is Doge is still in place. They're just doing the job a little more quietly than they were when he was there. And I think that's going to be the difference in terms of beginning to actually cut money rather than creating headlines.
So I know we talk a lot about the Doug Sosnik memo, but prior to that we were, as we were heading into the August recess, the Dems were like convinced that this Medicaid reforms to kick illegals off, they could frame as cuts to Medicaid, cuts to essential services, and make that a big issue. Is that, I mean, again, that doesn't fall into this issue that you're talking about. Is that a winning issue for Democrats? Should Republicans be on defense on this?
Well, what we have found so far is it's all about, in terms of trying to monitor what's been talked about, the big, beautiful bill, is that it is all a matter of how we discuss it. So it's the language that you use around it. It is, it's sort of, if you're talking about Medicaid cuts, no, that's bad. That didn't help Republicans. Nothing real profound there. But if you're talking about providing better services and more access and more affordable services, and that is the way to approach it. And so I think what this is going to get into on a race by race basis, Sean, is, and you worked enough on the House to know how this drills down, is every campaign has got to fight it on their own. And it's really an important aspect of knowing that if you've got a lot of seniors in your district or a lot of hospitals that are maybe seeing their funding cut, but their funding's being cut not because it's being cut off, just so they don't have as many patients because they're in a rural area somewhere, that's going to have to be dealt with. And that is a challenge, but it's one that is very addressable. And we've talked about a lot in past reports and tried to provide some language on it. Overall, I think as it's explained, it can be a positive. If explained well, explained correctly, explained accurately, it can be a positive for Republicans. But the one thing, it's stunning to me, and I'd love your opinion on this, that you still have Republicans who are hosting town halls whenever really all they're doing is showing up in front of a bunch of paid Democrat activists. And it really did not lend itself. I have to say the town halls that I observed on behalf of my clients, those that had them, against my advice, was that it didn't really turn out to be a positive situation because nobody was there to have a discussion about it. They showed up with Democrat talking points, and it just was it was pretty negative environment.
Yeah, I'm pretty pro, being accessibility. I think regardless of where you are, but I agree with you. These sort of traditional town halls don't serve the same purpose that they used to, because the internet and email and such has allowed us to interact with our elected officials much more efficiently and effectively. So the idea of saying I've got to go down to the senior center to talk to Congressman X is kind of silly, right? And to be blunt, what's a good town hall? 250, 300 people, and you represent 1 million too. Right. I mean, it's so there's all these ways in which you can do a teletown hall now, and make sure that you're only getting people in your district. I mean, so I agree with you. You're just allowing the Democrats to create a snapshot video by doing that. But I think part of the problem, Chris, is that there's a bunch of these guys who truly and authentically believe in doing them as a part of their public service. And I'm guaranteeing you their staff is like, boss, bad idea. Yeah. And they're like, They do it once and are probably like, okay, you were right. Never to be done again. But even guys in like pretty red areas, because it's not real, it's AstroTurf. These are like Soros funded activists that are getting bussed in to disrupt the event, clearly to make social media clips.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. If you follow Data Republican on Twitter, it's been on X. She has done an amazing job of exposing the payments that go to these activists that show
Data Republican?
Yeah, Data Republican. She is small R. And yeah, she's a data scientist who just digs into all these charitable reports and is able to prove on time after time what's going on, that these are paid activists. Very seldom are they actually real the kind of people that I used to be, when a young Republicans, college Republicans would go show up and have a rally, and it was, we were doing it because we believed in it. That's not the case on the other side. But to get back to the question you asked me, and I'm sorry, I kind of jumped into the whole activist thing in town halls. I think if we're going to talk about, for Republicans to talk about with GOP, with persuadables, is you got to avoid the cutting entitlements thing. You got to talk about protecting seniors and taxpayers. You got to talk about ending fraud and abuse. You got to talk about work for able-bodied adults. You got to talk about strengthening Medicaid, Medicare for the future. Those are the kind of messages that work with voters. And if we end up talking about that, which we probably shouldn't, I told you the issues that, if Republicans are able to stick to, we'll win the election in 2026. But we can win on those issues. We just have to have the right language and stay away from cutting benefits, entitle reform, block grants, caps, things like that.
So the number one issue that you said is decisive is the economy. So should they talk about the tax cuts, no tax on tips, no tax? I mean, that seems to fit in that economy bucket.
Yeah, absolutely. No tax on tips, no tax on Social Security. Those are the ones that are big issues. But the one thing I would say is that's kind of the sleeper issue, I think, of 2026 is housing. And as long as, interest rates could stay up or don't go down as much as I think the president would like for them to, it is affordability, rent spikes, mortgage rates. These come up constantly in our data. And what's funny, they only started coming up, I would say, and again, I only started this role on January 1st, but had a lot of conversation with Brad, who ran it beforehand. He said he started seeing this mid to late fall of 2024. But here's the kicker on this, man. They're not partisan issues. Voters across the spectrum are angry. I mean, hardcore Dems are mad about this. And the Democrats are tied to green mandates, slow permitting, policies voters see as driving costs up. I mean, you look at California's built how many houses now, so rebuilt how many houses in the fire. Gavin Newsom can't run from that. And it's all about the policies that exist there, that the Democrats control the state. So Republicans are winning when they frame housing around affordability. And yes, it is a component of the economy, but it is, the economy is a little bit esoteric for us, whereas all of us need a place to live.
But isn't that hard though? This is what I don't get about. See, I agree with you. I hear it all the time. I think you're picking up exactly what the sentiment is. But the question is, how do you campaign on that? Because you've actually got an interesting dynamic here. I'm a homeowner. So when I get my little Zillow update and it says my home went up, I'm like, yay, that's more equity. We're making right. If you're out of the market, if you're a renter, you go, that sucks because now that home is even further out of reach for me. So there is this little interesting dichotomy that exists within housing because current homeowners are excited when they see their home price go up because it means more equity for them. But if you're a young person trying to get into the market particularly, you're probably a little bummed.
Well, I think the answer is lower interest rates, what the president keeps talking about. You'd probably be pretty excited. I don't know what you financed at, Sean. But if you finance at 6, you're able to refinance at 2.5. You'd be pretty psyched about it. And I think that's what that would be a ton of money back in our pockets to be able to refinance. It would allow someone who doesn't own a home today to be able to go and buy a home. And to me, that's what it gets down to. And if we can tie the Dems back to their policies, and we win when we frame housing around affordability, deregulation, and stability. And to me, every one of those, all three of those are wrapped up in the overarching angle of mortgage rates. And I really love the fight that the president is picking. It's like I said, he's just so brilliant when it comes to marketing with the Fed on mortgage rates. I mean, he is constantly hammering down home that we need to reduce interest rates. And I'll give you another 2024 example where Eyesover saw this in Michigan and Nevada, where late surges for the president were tied to housing-based frustration. I really believe it's the next inflation as a major issue, and we don't track it closely enough, I think, as a political class.
The thing at the heart of Doug Sosnik's memo is that Trump is a drag on the ticket. And the interesting thing about the last couple of midterms is that Trump is very popular with the base, but they don't transfer it. They don't go out. People don't look at their congressman as a proxy for Trump. So Trump says, go support Congressman X. I want him. He's got my full endorsement. And people go, yeah, but you're not Donald Trump. So how transferable is the popular nature of Trump as we go into a midterm to get people excited and want to get out there, get that base going?
Yeah, I think I've just got to point to the races that I mentioned earlier where Trump was able to carry a lot of people over the line, the people that were not expected. Bernie Moreno in Ohio, Dave McCormick in Pennsylvania. There are plenty of illustrative races like that where he made the difference. And Republicans win when they stay on issues that drive emotion and attention. We track that daily, and I'll tell you, there's nobody who's better at driving emotion and attention than Donald Trump. So I think that's where Sosnik is just way off. And he doesn't really get the fact that, I mean, it's like he assumes, Sean, that the map is locked when it's not. What moves races is narrative momentum. And voter attention spikes during a rally, which who's better rallies than Donald Trump? A viral clip, a scandal on the other direction. And it's where when a candidate owns a moment with the right message, you can see perception shift in days. And you don't see that in the polling. That's why a lot of times what we'll have will be very different in the polling, but you can pull out of it what causes it to shift. And then the campaign takes advantage of that and begins to move numbers. And that's where polling misses those shifts because, unless you're in the field tracking every day, and who has the money to do that? But we can see the shift, the data in the same day that it breaks. And that's how you win in these close districts that Sosnik just kind of misses the idea of by moving fast when the data turns. And that's where whenever Trump goes in and has a rally, I feel like there's a lot of times, and I think about this in 2018, whenever I did 6 Senate races that cycle. Trump would go in and do a rally, and we'd go in the field the next week. And I think about it, like I did Rosendale in Montana, where we lost to Tester the last time. He'd go into a rally, and the race would pull to a 3-point race, and then we go back in the field a couple weeks later, and it'd pull back to 10 to 12 points. And that's because we didn't have the data and the information to take advantage of the time. And that, to me, is the difference between a sentiment analysis. Remember I said three-legged pool, you got to have a stool, you got to have all three of them, aspect of this and being able to pay attention to it, take advantage of it, and just being in the field every now and then to look at what's happening. You missed the chances.
So you mentioned my state here in Virginia. This is the big one. Republicans own all 3 constitutional offices, the governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general. The big prize that everyone's going to pay attention to is Abigail Spanberger, the Democrat current congresswoman, versus Winsome Sears, the Republican Marine current lieutenant governor. The last time you were on, Chris, you were basically saying what you guys were seeing was that this race was a lot closer, in fact, very much more winnable for Winsome than traditional polling. What has changed since the last time we spoke, and where do you see the race right now?
Yeah, it's well, for a while Spanberger got pretty far ahead. And now over the course of probably the last 4 weeks, I forget when it was that all those, everything started to happen in Northern Virginia. I've seen the race close back closer. And I think Sears, from a messaging standpoint, has all the momentum. And in fact, it's why you saw Spanberger came out with a new ad recently in which she's sort of trying to refute remember the woman who had the sign that says blacks can't drink at my water fountain, and I don't support what's going on in Northern Virginia with the school system. I mean, she's really having to backtrack some because I think she senses that she's in trouble. And I do believe that with a well-run campaign, and Sears has a talented team around her. Roughly, I'm not a part of it. I wish I were, but I wish her the best and do everything I can to try and be helpful in terms of sending her along information. And it is, I think she has got the momentum right now, just like Youngkin did at this point in 21. Can she ride that out through November? That's where it's going to get down to a fundraising / communication game. And we've seen that a lot of times in politics where Democrats are able to just outspin Republicans so dramatically that they are almost swept over by a tidal wave. And I hope that doesn't happen to Sears, because she is an African-American woman. Like you said, she's a former Marine. She is a generational candidate. And I'll tell you a story, Sean. When I was working for Youngkin, there was a rally. Can't remember where it was in Northern Virginia. I went to very few of them, but I went to this one because I wanted to see if all 3 candidates were going to be there. And there was a woman in the front row who passed out, fell out of her chair. and Sears was in the middle of her speech. It was before Glenn got up and spoke. And she jumps off the stage and immediately begins administering CPR to help the woman. And I'm like, there was not because cameras were there or anything else. That's just who she is. I don't even know if she was a medic in the Marines, but she obviously had training. And the woman was taken out on a stretcher. And last I heard, she was doing great. So Winsome Sears is just she would make a great governor. And I really am hopeful that she's able to maintain that momentum, because I see it as a closer race than any of the polling shows. Still,
give me a number. Is it 3 points, 5 points?
Probably 4 to 5. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk New Jersey. I always say this. It's like Lucy with the football. I get excited. I get fired up. I got Jack Citarelli on the show next week. How excited should we be getting about New Jersey?
It is a little bit tougher. But, we all said that in 21 also, and I think it ended up being just a few, almost as close, just the other direction as what we beat McAuliffe by with Youngkin. So, yeah, I feel the same way. It's one of those ones where you always feel like you're in the game, and then just right at the end, things don't go your way. But I'm optimistic about it. The last time I looked at it, and I'm actually about to look at it here this afternoon. I wish I'd done the report before I came on your show. Have me back on next week. I'll give you another report on it.
We'll get you back on.
But it's, last I looked at it, it was a little bit further apart than Virginia was, but certainly not in the, let's give up and move on category.
All right. You did mention Gavin Newsom in California. I had Jessica Milan Patterson on. She's the former Republican chairman out there in California. She's one of the two groups that's leading this effort to raise all this money to push back. I don't know. Can you separate Gavin Newsom from Prop 50, or is Prop 50, this redistricting effort in California, tied to Newsom? Like, you know what I'm saying? Is it like, if Newsom's doing well, does that do well? Or is it two distinct things?
No, it's pretty close to being tied together. And this is what I'm seeing in some of the reports I'm doing there, is that you even have Democrats that are rejecting what's going on with Newsom. Now, I'm not implying that means that it goes down. But there is a backlash toward Newsom on public safety. There's a backlash on the fact that they can't get homes rebuilt. There's a backlash on spending with the train. I mean, my gosh, you read Ezra Klein's book, Abundance. I mean, it's basically the first part of the book is all talking about how horrible California is. But having said that, it's still a Democrat state. I feel good about the chances of the anti-50 campaign, because I think the messaging works for them. And you've got key groups and even former opponents that are switching over and saying this is too much. Newsom is going too far with this. And the difference between what he's trying to do in California and what happened in Texas, because he tries to tie the two together, is there was actually an initiative that required California to draw the lines to a nonpartisan commission. So he's now trying to undo that. I think it makes it a completely different type of effort. And there's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars spent on each side of this effort. It'll be really interesting. I would say right now, I think the anti-side has the momentum. I believe Arnold Schwarzenegger jumping on board is very positive for the anti-Newsom, the anti-50 side. Who knows? Things can swift quickly in California. Certainly seen that in the last few cycles where, we've lost seats in Orange County and other places where we've been picking them up. So I don't know what ultimately ends up happening. I think right now, though, I would, if I were betting on it, I would bet on the anti-50 redistrict. Right. So stopping the redistricting side.
Well, that's a great way to end it on a very positive note as we head into a weekend. Chris Wilson from Eyesover, thanks for being with us, and we look forward to having you back again.
You bet. Thank you, Sean.
You bet. All right, guys, thanks for joining us. I dropped a new column today at SeanSpicer.com. We've got a great show for you Monday. Governor Rod Blagojevich of Illinois is going to be here to talk about crime, whether the president should send troops in there. We'll see you back here then. Have a great weekend. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.